And you might be wondering, why on earth would I be asking that question? Why would I hate my beloved grandpa now? And I should explain that even though I said the topic says grandpa, let me get this plugged in so that we don't shut off in the middle of broadcast. Okay. All right. It's not just grandpa, right? I use grandpa just as a space holder there, but we're really talking about grandpa, grandma, auntie, the elders in our lives, the folks who raised us. We could even extend that to teachers, pastors, all the elders in our lives, the people who had a hand in raising us, in bringing us up. And I want you to also remember that we're talking about, when I say, do you hate grandpa? Maybe I should have said, do you respect your grandpa? Because that's actually the subtitle of this topic. The subtopic is, now that you are grown, can you find it in your heart to respect the elders, the folks who raised you? And there is a difference between love and respect, right? You can love someone but not respect them. Respect has to be earned, even if you really want to respect the person, but based on their actions or lack of action, you just can't respect them. It's almost as if it is beyond you. The person has to earn it for you to really, in your heart of hearts, respect that person. If you're of my generation and older, I can vouch for my generation and older, we were brought up on the premise that respect must be shown, especially to your elders. Your grandma and your mom can tell you when they were growing up that, especially, so I'm talking from the Jamaican experience, by extension, the Caribbean experience. You can let me know what it was like in your neck of the woods, but I know the Jamaican experience, I got the tail end of it, because it's not so much so now, but my generation got the tail end of it. My mom and those before her, they were raised to show utmost respect for their elders, regardless of the character of the elder, regardless of the reputation. Just the fact that you were older, you were entitled, you were considered to be entitled to that respect. So our moms and grandmas and grandpas would tell you that when they were coming up, if they passed an elder on the street, they had to say good morning, they had to say good evening. And if they were in the community doing something, being mischievous, being out of order, you were sent to the shop and you stopped and play, or you do whatever you weren't supposed to do, another elder in the village, in the community, was entitled, had the right to discipline you there and then in whatever means they saw fit. And when you got home, you would get another dose of discipline. This was considered normal, this was considered totally okay, because it takes a village, right? So, okay. Nowadays, you will have youngsters passing people on the street. They don't say good morning. They don't acknowledge you in any way. And if they do something and you try to reprimand them, they will cuss you out. They might even be up in your face with violence, right? So you really have to be careful of the youngsters nowadays. Some things that you would never dream of hearing a youngster say or do. This generation is very brazen and sometimes very disrespectful. All right. So we were raised to be respectful of our elders, regardless, right? But I'm saying when you become an adult and maybe certain things that as a child you didn't know, it just went over your head, whether it was happening in front of you or not, or you just couldn't pick it up because you weren't exposed to certain things, you didn't even know that some things existed or was possible. So you took people as they came for the most part. Some of us were precocious and it's almost like adults in children's bodies, so we could perceive things and put things together. Some of us were street smart that way, right? The average child, things just flew above their heads. They just didn't know what was going on. And so the adult may have been the most nefarious, but because they put on a facade for the children, you saw them as, you know, normal adults, or you saw them maybe even as heroes in your eyes and heroines in your eyes because you weren't privy, right? Right. So Jazzy is saying, yes, your mom didn't raise you the street will. If your mom doesn't raise you the street will, absolutely. Right. So some of us were street smart. It depends on your upbringing. It depends on where you found yourself growing up, because certain places you as a child had to essentially become an adult in your mind, at least, in order to survive certain situations. My childhood, I was so naive to certain things. So I grew up in the rural parts of St. Andrew, close to Kingston, but far enough away to be rural, right? And so we're just galloping about the place and playing dolly house and whatever, having fun. And for me, my head was always in the cloud. I spent most of my time, still do. I spent most of my life in here. So things, the mundane things just went right above me, right? So when you become an adult now and you start doing adult things and you start putting two and two together and you say, well, hold on. And you also looking at your family dynamics and you're saying, but how come this and this and how come, and you start piecing things together and you realize that, hey, my dad must have been very promiscuous, or my mom must have been very promiscuous, or my auntie or uncle or grandma or grandpa, whoever. When you start putting things together and you say, but hold on a little bit, how come so and how come so and so, and you really start understanding what the adults in your life had been up to, right? Are you able to truly respect them? And that's what we're talking about today. We're going to be honest with ourselves. I'm not saying you might lose respect, you might still love them, and sometimes you might even start hating them. It might also become hate, right? My in Some of my uncles, at least three of my uncles, I met them when I was in my teenage years, right? My grandma met these young men years after she had been married to her husband. And for one of them, I know it was the meeting was accidental. So very late in life, we came to realize that, hey, my granddad had been out there sowing his oats, sowing his wild oats, right? And it's just coincidence that my part of the family learned about this. So you might even imagine that, hey, maybe some others out there, my granddad probably had other kids out there that we don't even know of yet. And this was the fact of it is that this is not a one-off thing. This is a very real, very widespread thing. I know for Jamaican society, I know for Caribbean society, I can tell you about that. So you're saying, what kind of character did my granddad have? Now I can tell you about my granddad, the relationship I had with my grandfather growing up. It was much closer than the relationship with my dad. I call my grandfather daddy, right? And my grandfather, while my father was asleep in bed, my grandfather woke me up 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, got me ready for school, walked me up the hill, wait for me to get the bus. That's the kind of man he was. So I'm not attacking his character in terms of his heart, what a kind person he was, how giving and loving and nurturing he was as a granddad and as a dad. But he had a double life, as did many of the men in the society growing up. As children, this went over our heads. It went over my head, right? I just knew the granddad who was always there for me, always waking me up. We went places together, hand in hand, right? We used to have this thing in Jamaica, you call it to run boat. When you say run boat, like you gather different ingredients from everybody bring a little thing and you put it together and you set up the fire outside and you cook your pot. Me and my granddad, we did that. So I have very fond memories of my granddad. I wrote a novel dedicated to my granddad, right? But this man was also going about, he cheated on his wife. He was a cheater. He had several different relationships. Like I said, three of my uncles, they came into our lives much later. So my grandma had to deal with this, right? My my dad, our relationship, even though he was, from my childhood, he was there in the house. He was married to my mom, but he was not there emotionally for me. He was not present emotionally for me. And so when my dad died, I did not attend his funeral because I didn't cry. I didn't feel a sense of loss. I didn't see the need. I didn't feel duty bound to even attend his funeral, right? I certainly attended my grandfather's funeral. When I became an adult, as a child, I could sense my dad wasn't available emotionally. But when I became an adult and I look back at this man and how he had lived, the fact that he spent most of his time at the rum bar, he was an alcoholic. He didn't attend any school function. He was just not present for his kids in terms of any socializing, in terms of any bonding. Maybe with my little brother, he was close with my little brother, but he was not influential in my life. And so, as an adult, when my father passed, as a result of the same having been an alcoholic and the damage that did to his liver, and so he eventually succumbed to that. I did not feel any kind of duty to attend this funeral, to go and say a kind word for him, because as an adult, I look back at his contribution. I had the perspective of an adult, the adult eyes looking back and saying, but this one was, he was pretty much worthless as a father. And if you are worthless as a father, I'm not going to attend your funeral and say kind words. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and do that, right? So I did not even attend. You see, we have this thing about we have to honor the dead, and we have to put the best words forward in terms of their eulogy. We have to send them off, and we pretend that these were stalwarts. The way we talk about these folks when they die, it's as if they were heroes, and they were not. And we also need to be honest about that, right? There's a thing that we have that once people pass, you can't say anything bad about them. You're to honor them, even if their lives were not honorable. I don't subscribe to that, right? In terms of the elderly, yes, I would be respectful to the elderly, but sometimes you have to accept that when you see the elderly going through some things, it's their own karma, and you cannot stand in the way of that. When you see them being isolated, when you see them get to a certain age and there's no one around, you have to ask yourself the question, especially if they have kids and the kids want nothing to do with them. You have to ask yourself the question, why is this so? How is it you have 5, 6, 7 kids and none of them want to have anything to do with you? What were you up to? None of them feel, I mean, I know there are parents who put out their best, and the kids come up and they have no character within themselves, the kids. And so they have no sense of duty or any sense of obligation to the parents. They just go off. That's their thing. But you have some parents who the kids would want to help, but when they think of the fact that the parents neglected or abused them, they don't feel inclined to have anything to do with that parent, whether they're on their deathbed or not. And we have to remember too that some of these elders, they have some really caustic traits, and the older they get, the more it has calcified in them. Some of these elders are some of the most toxic human beings. Don't be deceived by the frailty of their physical appearance. Don't be deceived by the shaky voices. They are villains who have calcified on this planet because they have been here long. That's all they have going for them, is that they have been here long, right? Sometimes some of the, you say, our parents and our extended family and the village that raises us, it's the first it's like it builds our self-esteem or it breaks our self-esteem, right? One of the first times that our self-esteem is exposed. And the things that our parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles, the elders, the things that they say to us help to shape our self-esteem from a very young age. When you think back at your childhood, try to remember some of the things, some of the negative things that your elders said to you. And some of them, if you ask them, they will tell you they did it out of love. They did it out of trying to make you have a sense of reality. So I remember when I was growing up, you might have a young boy whose father abandoned the family, and he had the misfortune of looking like his dad. And every day he woke up, he would be told, "You look like your worthless papa. You look like your good for nothing papa. You look like your ugly papa." We don't we try not to understand the damage, the emotional and mental damage that this does, and the damage to the self-esteem. When we tell our kids, and this is rampant in the Caribbean, we tell them how them black and ugly, or them nose big, or them lip big, or them hair picky picky, or them hair favor kaya, feel like kaya. You are damaging the self-esteem of your sons and your daughters, telling them that this one have good hair, the closer to the European standard. You're telling them they have good hair, and the closer to our African ancestry. You're telling them that the hair is bad, and it's rough, and it's rebellious, and it's hard to deal with. It's hard to comb. You tell them how the skin this and the skin that, and you are damaging the self-esteem. And a lot of our people have self-esteem problems because of the things that we were told by the ones who claimed to love us and have our best interests at heart. They felt like they could just tell you anything and you were supposed to recover from it, right? They batter you down. They tell you, if if you were a late starter, a late bloomer, and you had a relative, a cousin, a sibling who was faster, they would compare you and tell you, "Oh, you're dunce and that one bright." I mean, I saw persons in my family suffer from this. They were compared to me because I was a very bright child. I was very quick as a youngster, and I heard several times the adults in my family comparing other kids in the family, and I saw and felt that they suffered internally. And even as adults, some of them have said things where you pick up that, yeah, they took this personally, this comparison that was made, right? They took it personally. Our relatives, the elders in our families, sometimes were the ones who inflicted physical abuse, right? Once you stepped out of line, and especially if you were a child who was a very independent child in terms of your thought processes, things needed to make sense to you before you agreed to do them. You didn't just conform because you had that independence of thought and you wanted things to make sense. Woe be unto you if you were one of those kids who asked questions, who got a command and didn't jump to it like a soldier. You were brutalized for the most part. In the Caribbean experience, I can tell you, you were not to question, you were to just jump to it, whether it made sense or not, right? And so a lot of physical abuse happened. I witnessed. I mean, I didn't get a lot of beatings. The only time I got slaps really was when I decided to become a vegetarian at 13 years old, and my mom wasn't having it. When I came home in the evenings, I would get slapped every evening to eat the meat, eat the meat. This is what cook for dinner, you must eat this. Until she realized that, because I was also very stubborn. So she realized it wasn't working, and then she just allowed me to eat the vegetables, right? But you witness, and you can vouch for this, you witness some serious physical abuse. You would see parents beating kids with sticks and machetes and anything they could grab, slippers, broom, anything that was in the way. Some real serious beatings, right? This is part of our culture. This is what we grew up on, and it was considered the norm, right? Some of the adults in our life gave us the most terrible verbal abuse, the things that they said about you, and you were expected to just shake it up, but these things sank deep into our psyche. A lot of us as kids, a lot of us, this is rampant incest and molestation. The girls especially, but the boys too. Whether it's father, stepfather, uncle, grandpa, neighbor, friend, stranger. A lot of the women you see walking around today, and they look normal and they look like they have it all together here, they are in turmoil in their heads, unable to even accept a man into their lives because of the damage that was done to them by the men who were tasked with caring for them, the men who should have been protecting them. A lot of the men you see walking around were villains, absolute villains, and they got away with murder. Some of them literally got away with murder. The types of abuse. I wonder how many grown men walking around today can honestly say, I have never had intercourse with an underage girl. If we were to do a poll, if we were to ask the average man you see walking around, how many of you can say, I have never had sex with an underage girl, with a minor, a juvenile? I have never had sex with a juvenile. As an adult, I'm not even talking about when you yourself were a juvenile. As an adult male, you've never had sex with a juvenile. Can you say that? Hmm? And for some of you, the reason you get away with it because the young lady was just barely legal. Some of you're willing to wait until they just step over the border. Barely legal. One day after 18, right? A lot of our grandmas, they were in marriages for decades in which they were not happy because they could not be happy because they were oppressed, they were beaten, they had no rights, they had no voice. They had a husband who was sowing his seeds all over the place, having 3, 4 families in the village or outside the village with and bringing in these so-called bastard children. A lot of us were also labeled bastard children, and the stigma that had for those of us who were, that you're a bastard, you were born outside of wedlock, um, you're an outside child because your dad was the community dick, and he had to be going around being a nuisance in the community, and you were a product of that, and you were not made to forget it. It damages, it does something to the psyche. A lot of us grew up without the presence of a father. He was an absentee, or mother too sometimes. It's just that more often it was the dad who was the absentee, but we have absentee mothers as well, right? Deadbeats. And some of them having been absent for 10, 20 years. So now the child was raised by someone else. You had no input. And then you come now as an adult and you want that child to you want to come and claim the child. Oh, my daughter, my son just graduated from college. You want to benefit from that. You want, when you're in the nursing home or you're in the infirmary or you're in the hospice, you want that child now to come and show you sympathy and show duty to you after you have neglected that child. Some of you, when the woman tells you she's pregnant, that's the last day she sees you. The last day she sees you is the day she tells you she's pregnant. You're gone, and you don't come back until the child is grown and settled. And now you have fallen on hard times because life is like that. You give, you reap what you sow. And if you didn't sow, now you're not reaping, and you want somebody else to have a sense of duty towards you. You want, now you're in the hospice, you've been left to die. You want the child to come and have allegiance to you, or you want the woman who you abused, who you enslaved pretty much. You want her now to turn around and care for you. A lot of our men, they're not really ready to commit, to settle in, as they call it, until they have wrecked themselves and they are of no use to anyone. No use physically, emotionally, mentally, no use financially, nothing left. That's when they're ready to commit themselves to you. And you, they want you now to be there to wipe their drool, to push them around in the wheelchair, to wipe their butts. And they did not give you that loyalty. Can you respect someone like that? You have relatives who malice, they're in malice for decades, for years, not talking to each other. For some petty things sometimes, they're in malice. And then when they fall on hard times, they want to come and they expect you to just forget and forgive everything that they have done and said. And maybe when they were riding high in their moment of glory, they put you down. They weren't willing to share. They weren't willing to acknowledge even that you were kin. You have some relatives who don't claim kin with you. They sever all ties with their past. They don't want to be reminded where they came from. They don't want to have any contact with you as their kin. However, you see, so they were going like this, and maybe you were here or you were probably going down, and now it has been reversed. They're heading, they peaked. Maybe you were steadily, slowly climbing. They plummeted, right, by whatever means. They peaked, and now the only way for them is down, and you're still steadily going up, right? Now they want to pretend that there was no animosity, there was no nothing done bad on their side, right? No condescension on their side. They want you now to embrace them when they have nothing more to stand on. So I'm asking, let us be honest. When you, as an adult, now you might have certain things that you say, okay, as an adult, there are certain things that I want to make sure that I put in place for myself, for my kids, for those who are going to be here after me, those who I am responsible for, right? You want to put certain things in place. So, for example, for most adults, I would say they want to at least know that, all right, I have a house, I have some land, I have financial investments, I have a car, I have assets. And these are things that I can claim as my legacy, things that I can pass on to my kids. For some of us, we're not even resting on those kind of things. Those are the basics. For others of us, we want to have a different kind of legacy. We want to establish businesses, we want to establish empires, right? We have the empire mindset. We're thinking in terms of legacy that is long term, inheritance that is long term, that can be actual wealth that is going to, you take it to a place where it can increase itself exponentially. It becomes a creature of its own, can grow on its own exponentially. And that's the kind of legacy we think of. That's the kind of inheritance we want to put in place for when we are no longer here. Those who we have ushered into the world, our kids and their kids, will have that for the long haul, right? So when you look back at the adults in your life, some of them now are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, with nothing that can even remotely be classified as a legacy. And you say to yourself, this person has been on this planet for decades. They have nothing to show for it. Some of them don't even have an education, right? Some of them don't even have the intangible things like a decent relationship with their kin. Not even that. Not even a decent relationship with their kids. No kind of legacy, nothing to with your name on it to say, having been here, having been here for all these decades, what have I done? Right? What have I contributed to the world to show for the fact that I was here? Do you find yourself, are you still able to respect those elders honestly from the bottom of your heart? Are you able to respect them for having been here 5 decades, 6 decades, 7 decades, 9 decades on this earth with nothing to show? And even the children who they accidentally had, some of them accidentally had, even they don't even have a decent relationship with. They did not make the kind of impact even on the lives of the humans that they brought into the world. They did not make the kind of impact to the point where these humans want to have anything to do with them, feel any kind of obligation towards them, any kind of duty to take care of them. Know that they can no longer take care of themselves. If you had a relative, let's say you had a relative and that relative had kids, whether male or female, that relative had kids and did not take care of the kids, did not contribute or just meagerly contributed. And the kids decided not to have anything to do with him or her. Now the relative is in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Would you, as a distant relative, feel obligated obligated to take care of them? Would you feel duty bound to step in and take over the care financially and emotionally and all of those? Or would you feel duty bound to insist that the kids do it even if they feel no allegiance to the person? Are you able to say, I'm not, you might still love them as your relative, but can you respect them for the fact that they have been here and have not made the kind of contribution to the people and to the society to the point where now they can have it reciprocated? We have this saying that, well, blood is stronger than water. And when we say that, we mean that those who are related to us, whether our close family or our more distant kin, once you are related, then you have that natural obligation to the person to put that person first, to prioritize that person ahead of those relationships that you would have formed of your own volition, the friendships, the business relationships, even your marriage, right? So that is considered the water relationships, whereas the blood relationships are those that you really had no control over. You were born into the situation or born into the predicament, if you want to call it that, right? But having been born into the predicament, the fact that you are blood related, for many persons, they would say, well, they, that alone gives them that sense of obligation. I know for me, when it comes to respect, is something that I don't freely give. I don't believe that persons are entitled to my respect just on virtue of them being here or being related to me or being older than me. I am not going to be disrespectful. So we need to make the difference here. I'm not going to be disrespectful unless they, unless they initiate something towards me that I have to, in retaliation, do that. But I'm not going to be disrespectful to anyone. However, my respect has to be earned regardless of whether you gave birth to me or I gave birth to you, or we found ourselves in the same family, or you were here before me, or whatever. In as much as I'm not going to disrespect you, I might not have respect for you in my heart of hearts. And that's something we need to differentiate that. For me, I respect people who are progressive. I respect people who have a sense of wanting to better themselves, putting out effort to educate themselves, putting out effort to sharpen their skills, putting out effort to take care of themselves, putting out effort to take care of their responsibilities, and your responsibilities extend to the children who you bring into this world. Just yesterday, someone in my community, a man, this man is in his 50s, right? He had approached me a couple of days ago and he said he was asking me for money. Said he wanted some bus fare or something like that. And this is someone who over a couple times he has done this, right? Maybe the first one or two times I gave it to him And then I realized it was becoming a habit. And so when he approached me some days ago, he said, he's asking me for some money. I said, no. And that's all I said. I said, no. And then I saw him again yesterday. And again, he was asking me for money. And I said, listen, I cannot respect a man who goes around begging. I cannot. I can't bring myself to respect a man who goes around begging. I'm not going to give you money like that. I prefer if there's something I need to be done and you're willing to do it, there's some job I have that you can do and you're willing to do it. I prefer if you do that and I pay you to do it. Even if I end up overpaying him based on his skill level to do the job, I prefer that. And it's not just men, people in general. If you are an able-bodied person, even if you have certain disabilities, you can you have other skills. I don't believe that just because you're blind, you must stand with your pan begging. That's just my personal belief. I've never been blind. I hope never to be blind. But in my mind right now, having never been blind or knew what it's like, what it feels like, I cannot imagine that that could be a valid reason for anyone just because of that to decide that they should no longer put out effort. They should now go and stand at the supermarket door and beg for the rest of their lives. Even though it is a disability, yes, it is a disability, but there must be other ways in which you can earn your keep. For some people, they just need to break a nail and they become disabled, and that's enough reason for them to go around begging. I don't support that. I respect people who are willing to put out effort to receive. Things should be reciprocated. You must be willing to put out effort to get something in return. You must be willing to sharpen yourself in order to earn the dividends according to the level that you want to earn them. You want to earn this level, sharpen yourself up to that level. Put out the effort. If you have been on this planet for X amount of decades, we're talking about people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who have nothing to show for having been on the planet for all of these decades. They don't have material things to show, nothing tangible to show, and nothing intangible to demonstrate to us. They have no relationship with anyone to show, even to say, okay, this is what I have. I've been on the earth culturing hearty, healthy relationships. Not even that. Let alone the land, the car, the house, the stocks, the businesses, the education. Nothing to show. They squandered everything in their youth. They squandered their health in their youth. They squandered their time in their youth. They squandered their mental acuity in their youth. They did not invest in any way. They did not progress in any way. They did not invest in anyone or even in themselves. Nothing to show. At 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old, not even the kids who snuck out of you while you weren't looking, not even them you were able to pump anything into, to the point where now they can have allegiance to you. That is a life wasted. That is oxygen wasted. And I know for me, I cannot respect such a person. I am not going to be abusive towards that person anyway, but in my heart of hearts, I cannot. How do you feel about that? Are there conditions for your respect? Are there certain situations and qualifications where it doesn't matter what else, once that is in place, the person will get your respect? I think several persons in my family thought that it was disrespectful of me not to attend my father's funeral, for example. I don't agree. It was just a natural response to the fact that this man was not really a presence in my life. Even for the years where he lived under the same roof, he was not a presence, he was not a force in my life, right? My father was fast asleep when my grandfather woke me up 4 o'clock in the morning. And this was in the rural part of the country, right? We didn't have any bathroom inside the house. I had to go outside in the dark to bathe, get myself ready. My father was fast asleep. My father had a vehicle. My father had a white Datsun van parked in the yard, right? And he was fast asleep while I was outside bathing in the dark. And my grandfather was in the kitchen getting my breakfast ready. And then my grandfather would walk with me up the hill to get a bus. My father was fast asleep. Things that happened at my school, whether I achieved anything, my father was not there. He did not attend. He didn't know. He pretty much didn't care. There were no talks, there were no walks. My grandfather and I would walk throughout the community hand in hand. That's the man who my allegiance was to. That's the man who I wrote a novel and dedicated it to. The one who was there. That's just how it is with me. If you want to have any value in my life, I can tell you, for me, you have to show up. You have to let me see your value. You're not just gonna get it like that. I don't give out respect like that. And things must be reciprocated, right? Things must be reciprocated. They must be earned and they must be reciprocated. That's my take on it. Let me know how you feel about it. And let me repeat the question. Now that you're grown, and you have now with the adult eyes, not the childhood eyes anymore, who you're just seeing the facade that these elders put on. They're speaking to you in the high-pitched voice that we adjust for speaking to children. They have the smile on, they have that facade on. They cover up the things that they do. You're not privy to them because you're a child. Know that you're grown and you sit back and you look at the reality of the situations that were created. And you say, but hold on. If this and this, then that means that and that, right? If so and so, then that means such and such. was happening or was not happening, and this one must have been that, and that one must, you're putting these things together as an adult now, and you have that perspective. Have you found yourself recalibrating and reassessing the elders in your life? Are you still able to give them that respect? I'm not even saying, are you there for them? Do you still talk to them? Do you still smile with them? Are you able to respect them? That's what I'm asking, right? Are you able to respect your dad? Now that you look back and see the situation and you realize what your dad must have been up to. Are you able to respect your mom? Now that you look back and you realize what mom must have been up to in order for these things now to be as they are. Are you able to respect grandpa now that you find out maybe somebody in the family has come out and say, I never told anyone, but grandpa used to do this to me, or uncle used to do that to me. All along, you had uncle as this wonderful human being, always happy, always giving, always had a kind word, always had you in his lap, always had you on his back, jockey back rides, playing with you. Now that one or two persons in the family have come out as adults, they have been carrying this burden all along, not telling anybody, and they come out and say, uncle used to do this to me, or auntie used to do this to me, or grandpa used to do this, or grandpa said this to me, or somebody told me that grandpa did that, or grandma did that. Are you able to respect them? That's what I'm asking. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have actually been through this situation where you had to reevaluate the elders in your life and reassign them to positions in terms of your level of respect. So that's the question for this week. That's what we're grappling with, and let me know your thoughts until next week when we talk about another intriguing topic. This is Kama. Take care. Enjoy your week.